In the heart of a bustling city lived a woman named Alara. She worked as a librarian, surrounded by books, which she cherished more than anything else. But there was something unique about Alara. She had a secret. She didn't just read stories, she could become them. It started one evening when, while skimming through an old, dust-covered book, Alara felt a strange sensation, a lightness in her body, a soft tug in her mind. The words on the page began to blur, as if they were becoming fluid, swimming together. A voice whispered, faint and far away, "Step in." Without thinking, Alara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the world around her had changed. The musty library was gone. Instead, she stood on a sunlit beach, the wind tugging at her clothes. The sand felt real beneath her feet, the waves real in their crashing rhythm. She was no longer in the library. She was inside the story. At first, it was exhilarating. She could move freely, interact with the characters, even shape the narrative. She could dive into the ocean and ride the waves like a dolphin, or sit beneath a palm tree and have deep conversations with strangers who weren't strangers at all. She could feel the sun on her skin and smell the salt in the air. It was the perfect escape, but after a while, Alara realized something unsettling. The more she immersed herself in the world of the story, the more the real world slipped away. The people she loved, her family, her friends, they faded into the background, like a forgotten dream. She tried to remember the feel of her cozy apartment, the hum of the city outside her window, but it was growing fainter, as though they were mere shadows in her mind. And then, one day, as she walked through the fictional beach, she saw something unexpected, a mirror. It stood alone, gleaming in the golden sunlight, out of place in this otherwise natural landscape. Intrigued, Alara approached it. When she looked into the mirror, she didn't see her reflection. Instead, she saw a swirling void. Her face flickered in and out of focus, and a voice whispered again, "You cannot stay forever, Alara." She froze, suddenly afraid. "What do you mean?" she asked the mirror, though she wasn't sure why. The voice was calming, yet stern. "This world is a creation of your mind. You are both the author and the reader. But just like any story, it must end." A chill ran down her spine. She had thought she could stay here forever, but reality had begun to assert itself. This world, as vibrant and real as it felt, wasn't her true home. "Can I leave?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The mirror rippled, and the voice replied, "You must find your way back. But be careful, if you stay too long, the boundaries will blur. The story will consume you, and you will be lost within your own imagination." Panic flooded Alara's chest. She turned away from the mirror, looking for an exit, but the beach seemed endless now, the horizon stretching impossibly far. In the distance, a figure appeared, a man, standing with his back to her. He was tall, wearing a long coat, his face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. Her heart pounded. Could he help her? She ran toward him, calling out, but the figure didn't turn. He was a part of the story, a character, wasn't he? She reached him and touched his arm. His coat felt real, the fabric rough under her fingers. But when he turned to face her, his eyes were empty, voids that mirrored her own uncertainty. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "You cannot escape once you've stepped inside." A strange dizziness overcame Alara. The words from the mirror echoed in her mind. The world was starting to collapse, the edges crumbling away like paper. Alara shut her eyes tightly and whispered, "I want to return." Suddenly, the air around her grew heavy. A gust of wind whipped through the scene, and when she opened her eyes again, the beach was gone. She was back in the library, her fingers resting on the pages of the old book. The room was silent. The air was still. Her heart was pounding in her chest. It took a moment for her to process what had just happened. She was back. She was whole. But the mirror, the voice, they lingered in her mind, a warning she couldn't shake. From that day on, Alara never opened that book again. But the memory of the mirror haunted her dreams. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, when she read a line or two of a book, she could almost feel the pull again, that tug toward another world. She had learned the price of fiction, the lines between imagination and reality could blur in the mind's reflection, and once crossed, it was hard to find the way back. And so, Alara continued her life, always remembering that sometimes, stories aren't just tales, they are places, and sometimes, those places have a way of drawing you in, until you can no longer tell where the fiction ends and where your true self begins.